Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good fright.
My great-uncle and great-aunt never had any children, which was a shame because they both loved kids so much. They doted on their nieces and nephews, and then they doted on me when I came along. When I was a small child, my great-uncle loved to play with me and tease me, and I adored every bit of it. He would do anything to make me laugh. Silly dances and saying funny things, and making goofy noises. I remember one time when we rode with my grandmother to the car wash. I was about 4 years old. It was the early 1980s, so I was sitting on my great-uncle's lap in the car. The automatic car wash was noisy and I was afraid. So he put his face up against the car window and joked that he was getting his face washed. I started crying because that scared me even more, even though he was only trying to make me laugh. My sweet great-uncle died from cancer a few months later. One night after he passed, I was lying in my bed after bedtime. I was still wide awake listening to the show that my parents had on TV in the living room. I wasn't afraid or thinking about anything in particular when suddenly there was a loud gong sound, and the ghost of my great-uncle popped his head out of my bedroom wall above me. He was laughing because he thought that his surprise visit was hilarious, and he obviously thought that I would think so too. Instead, I screamed and ran to the living room and told my parents what had happened. They said that it must have been a dream. They didn't believe me, though they exchanged looks with each other. The gong sound had no cultural or personal significance. I think that my great-uncle just thought that it was a funny way to make an entrance. I feel bad that he was only trying to say hello and make me laugh, and I was too scared to appreciate his visit.
This isn't really creepy, more wholesome, I guess. Though when I think back to it, I get chills. My grandfather, who my siblings and I were very close with, passed away in 2013. I was 14 when he passed, and I'm 21 now. My best friend, who is able to speak and see spirits, had told me one day there was a short man standing behind me. I asked what he looked like, and she said he was short, had black hair that was combed back, and a jacket on that I have hanging by my mirror to this day. She said he was also wearing a hat, all indicating that that was my grandfather. She had never seen him before, and confirmed it was him when I showed her a picture. She told me that he's been following me all day, because he needed to tell me something. This girl I was dating at the time drew a picture that had my grandpa's name on it, and I put it on my wall. She hasn't seen it at all, and told me that my grandpa wanted me to take down the picture because the person who drew it had bad intentions for me, and he didn't like her. She also had no idea I had his jacket in my room, and he told her to tell me to take his jacket and put it by my bed that same night. I was totally freaked out, because she didn't know my grandpa, the jacket, or the picture. He had always wanted to check in on me and told me he loved and missed me. That whole night, I couldn't stop crying, because I'd waited so long for my grandpa to contact me somehow, and he did. I also feel like he saved my life, because this girl was super manipulative and lied to me. She had made me suicidal. I started self-harming. She was just horrible all around. She lied to me about her mom accepting her and liking me. She lied about self-harming a lot. And she lied about her mom beating her. She threatened suicide a lot when I tried to leave, and so on. My mom told me later that he chose this person because he knew she was someone who could be trusted, and he knew of her abilities. I never forgot that night, and I sometimes get chills when I think about it. My grandpa does visit me sometimes, whether it's through a dream or I feel his presence in my room. He'll sometimes sit on the end of my bed or touch my feet, which he did to my mom and her siblings when they were younger.
I thought I'd post this here for just a bit of a change from the darker and more scary stories. Firstly, I'd like to say that this isn't my story, but a collection of stories from my grandmother and mother from a house they lived in while my mother and her brothers were growing up. I myself am not sure if I believe in ghosts, but this story definitely adds to the believe in it side of things. A bit of background. For a long time, my mother's family lived in a large house outside a tiny village in Sussex, England. It was not the only house in the village that had paranormal stories surrounding it. My grandfather was a doctor at a large hospital, so he worked very long hours and wasn't home until very late. My mother has 2 younger brothers. Because of my grandfather's work, it was often just the 3 children and my grandmother in the house. Most of the stories came from my grandmother, but my mother and brother also has a story. Now, the stories. All of the children were at boarding school from about age 8 through until about 18. This meant that my grandmother spent a lot of time alone in this house. The house had several extensions added over the years, but the oldest part was several hundred years old. This included 2 of the bedrooms and the kitchen, among other things. My grandmother said that every time she was in the older part of the house, she always felt like she was being watched. However, she never felt threatened, and she said she always knew it was a woman watching her. The watched feeling was often accompanied by a smell of flowers or perfume of some sort. When she washed the dishes, she'd always known that there was someone just over her shoulder, but she never ever felt like it was anything other than supervision. The ghost was also known to be helpful sometimes. For example, if she'd lost something like her glasses or some car keys, and if she'd actually said it out loud, she'd often find the missing item in plain sight, such as right in the middle of the dining room table, or somewhere else she'd definitely looked before. She'd always made sure to say thank you to whomever found it. The main living room was in the recent extension, added sometime in the 60s, I think. The staircase was the old part of the house. Often when my grandmother was sitting in there at night, long before my grandfather got home, or if the children were in bed and they were back from school, she would hear light footsteps coming down the stairs and would stop outside the living room door. If the children were home, she normally assumed that one of them had gotten up, so she'd call out and tell whomever it was to come in, but they never did. When she got up to go and check on the children, they were always all asleep. Again, she never felt threatened. My mother also heard footsteps regularly. She was home alone with a friend when she was about 18. They were in the living room and they heard the same footsteps coming down the stairs. Her friend became very freaked out and they ended up staying in another friend's house, despite the fact that my mother told her friend that it was just the noise of the old housemaid. Staying with the footsteps, they were also heard by visiting friends and people who had no reason to know about them. The house was just off a narrow country lane above the village. My grandmother once invited some friends round for lunch. She quickly went down to the village to grab some stuff for lunch. As she left the shop, she saw her friend's car driving past, so she got in her car and followed them up the distance behind. She saw them pull into the driveway and drive up to the house. By the time she'd caught up, her friend had got out of the car and knocked on the door of the house. As she pulled up, they turned around and looked surprised to see her. They said they'd just heard someone come down the stairs to the door and assumed she'd been home. My grandmother assured them that the house was empty and as everyone was at school or at work. The last 2 stories are further proof to my grandmother that the woman inhabiting the house was no threat to anyone and was just looking out for them. My uncle reported that he once woke up during the night and saw a woman standing at the end of the bed that he didn't recognize. He said he saw a small smile and just turned around and walked out. He said she didn't seem scary at all, and he thought that she just looked very friendly. The last one is when they had some friends over for the weekend. This family also had 3 children, including a very small baby. All of the children had been put to bed, and the adults were sitting downstairs in the living room, enjoying the evening. They then heard a baby begin to cry, as babies often do. They thought that they'd go up and check in about 5 minutes. Suddenly, the baby stopped crying, and they heard the footsteps come down the stairs. My grandmother decided to go up the stairs and see if everything was okay. They found the baby awake, with a toy in the cot that definitely wasn't there when he put him to bed. Someone had also pulled the string of the lullaby maker, and the baby mobile was swinging gently. The baby was perfectly content and soon went back to sleep. My grandmother checked on all of the other children, and none of them were awake. It also wouldn't have been very easy for them to reach the cot and get back into bed without being heard, as the floors were very creaky. My grandmother is convinced it was the ghost of this mysterious lady who is looking after the baby, and then came downstairs when she was done.
So a little bit of backstory first. My fiance, Jay, and I had gotten a kitten together, and we loved him with everything. And tragically, we lost him too young due to an accident. We were obviously very broken and distraught. We think he was still here. We would hear his little squeak, random things would get batted across the living room. You would just feel a presence. Recently, we got another kitten, T. We weren't looking for one, but an abandoned 4-week-old kitten showed up and needed a home, so we took him in. We stopped noticing anything unusual, other than maybe T would start acting like he was playing with someone, but nothing directed to us. Now for the wholesome encounter. We sleep with our new kitten in his crate in our room. The other night we were both sound asleep, then I woke up to the feeling of a kitten walk over me, my pillow, and towards the cubby in the headboard. So I reached for my flashlight to look for our kitten, thinking, why did Jay let him out of the crate in the middle of the night? Then Jay said, I lost him, where is he? As I shined my flashlight everywhere, and T wasn't on the bed. We then checked the crate, there he was, sleeping so soundly, door closed. So back to sleep we went. The next morning I was telling Jay how weird it was that we both thought T was out of his crate and on the bed. I thought he let him out. He thought I let him out. Jay told me he felt a kitten climb over him in the middle of the bed. We stopped and looked at each other and realized what it was. It wasn't T. It wasn't a simultaneous dream. It must have been our first kitten just walking over us to go to bed. I was so happy he decided to visit us again. He's welcome anytime.
My great aunt lives on a 100-year-old farm. Growing up, it's one of those places I have my best childhood memories. My great uncle, her husband, would drive us around the farm on the tractor, let us help him feed the cows, fish in the creek, etc. We called my great uncle Jimmy Jack, and he was a very quiet, typical farmer, but he lived for entertaining the kids in our family, including his grandkids who called him Pops. When he was around, everything just felt right in the world. Peaceful. In the early 2000s, maybe around 2004, Jimmy Jack died of leukemia. It left this huge hole in our family, but his last wish was to be buried on his farm and for the family to continue to enjoy it. He was buried about 20 yards away from the house, and my great aunt got on the most beautiful headstone with the mural of the farm on it. In 2010, my sister, who we'll call M, gave birth to my nephew, who we'll call A. My sister and I would spend random weekends at the farm, visiting my great aunt and taking A to play in the fields and the creek. When A was about 2, my sister took him to the farm to stay for the weekend. The house is absolutely massive and has lots of history. Even before Jimmy Jack passed, you'd always get this feeling of being watched throughout the house. One night, M and A were sleeping in the same bed when M felt A get out of bed and heard him take a few steps away from it. Im sat up and saw A standing near the corner with his arms stretched out, as small kids do when they want to be held. He started saying, "Pops, Pops." Well, Pops was what my deceased great uncle was called by his grandkids. A also calls mine and A's dad Pops. In M's half-asleep state, she initially thought, "What? Dad isn't even here with us." But suddenly, she got this overwhelming feeling of peace around her. She realized A wasn't sleepwalking or calling for his grandpa. He was seeing Jimmy Jack. M had a lump in her throat, such as you get when you're about to release a happy cry. She called for A, who looked at her, and then looked back near the corner, his arms still stretched out, and slowly relaxed them to his side. M called him to bed, and he crawled in and slept peacefully for the rest of the night. M never told her great aunt about this. She's pretty religious, and M wasn't sure how she would react. But she knows from the pure energy she felt in that room that Jimmy Jack was just visiting the kids in the family. One more time.
So, when I was a kid, I had the prettiest cat ever. Her name was Answer. We got her in 2004, when I was 5 years old. She was the best girl, and we were literally inseparable. She always came to sleep next to me, and wherever I was, she would come sit on my lap or near me. If she was outside hunting, she would come running whenever I called her, and if I was sad or sick, she would lick me and come lay next to me. She started purring every time I even looked at her. And she purred loudly. She was the ultimate purr machine. We lost her when I was in the army, so I didn't have a chance to say goodbye. It broke me when I got the message from my mum where she told me my cat had died when she was sleeping, but then again, she was old, so I had been expecting it. We still had 2 cats, but still, nothing could replace her. And as much as I loved the other cats, she was special. After that, whenever I'm visiting my parents' place and I feel sad or anxious about something, I start hearing this quiet, soft purring underneath my bed. And it sounds like her purring. The first times I heard it, I thought it was one of our other cats under my bed, but when I looked, I saw nothing. But I could still hear the purring. It's been almost 2 years now since she died, and last time I heard the purring was last Saturday. My room's door was closed, so I knew there were no other cats in my room. I needed some alone time because my family can be exhausting at times. And I was just lying in my bed feeling a bit down, and I started hearing it again. The soft purring under my bed. Nowadays, I don't even bother checking it because I know I can't see a cat there. I just accept it, and it calms me down and makes me feel better, so whatever the purring is, it helps me. I just like to think it's my pretty girl, still wanting to make me feel better like she did when she was still with us.
When I was 6 years old, my family bought our first black Labrador. We named her Magic, and we were inseparable. When I was 18, she passed away from a heart tumor. I was absolutely devastated. I had a really hard time getting to sleep afterwards because she always slept in my bed with me. A year later, we got another black Labrador, and this weird phenomenon started happening. It should be noted the new lab refused to sleep in my room. He didn't even really like going in it at all. He'd always look intently at spots and then quickly leave. I'd bring him on my bed to try and get him to sleep in my room, and he'd jump off right away and cry to be let out. I sleep with my door closed, so I know it wasn't him coming in later. One night I was tossing and turning, and all of a sudden it felt as if someone had jumped on the bottom of my bed. It freaked me the hell out. Then, just like she would always do when she was alive, it felt like 4 paws were moving in a circle, trying to find that sweet spot, before the covers would gently press down at my feet. This happened every night for weeks. I sort of felt I was going insane, but one night it was really annoying me because it woke me up. So I said out loud, "Magic, go bug Mum." I was half joking to myself because I didn't actually fully believe it was her. But the next morning, over breakfast, my mum looks at me and says, "The strangest thing happened to me last night. I swear it felt like magic jumped on my bed, found a comfy spot, and laid down." I had never told my mum that I thought magic was jumping on my bed every night, because I thought I was insane, but my mouth dropped when she said this. I told her how it was happening to me, and that I had sent magic to bother her that night. We cried because we didn't want magic to think we replaced her. Later that week, it just stopped all of a sudden, and I told my mum I hadn't felt magic jump on my bed for the last few days. My mum told me that when I wasn't home, she went up to my room and told magic that we loved her and we will never forget her, and she could never be replaced, and it's okay for her to rest now. Ever since then, my new Labrador has slept in my room every night. I like to think magic gave him permission. My mum and I still tell people this story. We have no explanation for it, and we like to believe she came back to spend just a bit more time with us and show the new pup how to be the goodest boy.
I used to work in Tokyo, and I lived there with my family. But around 2 years ago, I became quite ill, and I was hospitalized. Due to this illness, I lost my job. I guess that's what incentivized my wife to divorce me as well. I have 2 daughters. I can't afford to take care of them currently, so they're being raised by my ex-wife. I'm so ashamed and sorry that I can't even keep up my child support payments. I was finally out of hospital when this all happened. I moved back to my hometown to get my medical treatment. Sounds good, doesn't it? Go back home, receive some medical treatment. But the truth is, I returned penniless to my aging parents. I knew I didn't have a good reputation in my family and with my neighbors. Couldn't do anything for leisure since I didn't have any money, so I just started to go fishing. I had a rod from my high school days. It wasn't in great condition, but it was fine for me. I spent my days fishing by a river in my neighborhood. Then last month, one morning I was fishing. I was there late. It started to get dark. I hadn't caught anything, and I was just thinking of packing up and heading home, when I raised my rod and found that something was hooked. I reeled in my line. I pulled out a soaking wet doll. It was about 15 centimeters in size. It was a cloth doll with long woolly hair. It looked as if it was stuffed with cotton. A little girl's doll for sure. As soon as I saw it, I was struck with powerful nostalgia. Memories from 30 years ago came rushing back to me. I knew that doll. It belonged to a girl I used to play with. Her name was Mickey. She lived about 100 meters from my parents' home. Her house was quite shabby, and since it's been knocked down and a supermarket parking lot's in its place, I used to hear her alcoholic father shouting at her. Her hair and her clothes were always dirty. I don't think her father ever provided for her properly. Back then, I never saw her without this doll. She never went to kindergarten. She used to always be waiting for me on the way home. She would call out, "Hey, big bro, come play with me." I remembered all of this while staring at the water-soaked doll. I knew for a fact it was her doll, because I was the one who threw it into the river. When I finished kindergarten, I went into school, and some of my new elementary school friends made fun of me for playing with Mickey. She would be waiting for me in her raggedy clothes, asking me to come play with her in front of my friends. I just ignored her. She silently walked back to her home. After this, she didn't approach me when I was with my new friends. She would just look at me, holding her doll, and go back into her house. Mickey looked very raggedy as the days went by. Her eyes seemed to plead with me as I walked by with my friends. Mickey's appearance progressively went downhill around this point. Her father had a reputation around town of running up bar tabs and dashing before paying. Because of his reputation, my parents didn't want me to play with Mickey anymore. One day, I was playing baseball or something with my friends by the riverbank I was now fishing on. Mickey was watching us playing, sat cross-legged with her doll, just off to the side, lying on the grass. My friends were all making fun of me, teasing me about her, so I just shouted at her in anger, "Go home, Mickey!" I guess she didn't hear me, because she was smiling and looking my way. My friends continued to tease me. This angered me so much, I ran over and snatched up her doll and threw it into the river. It flew over the grass bank, but at the time I didn't know if it landed in the water. Mickey saw what I had done, looked at me with eyes welling with tears, and frowned as she walked away. About a month later, Mickey died. It was unknown how she died, but rumor around town was she had been beaten to death by her alcoholic father. It all came back to me as I was holding her doll, her only cherished possession. How could this doll be here after 30 years? It can't be possible. And I swear, as I was looking at that doll, I heard a voice call, "Hey, big bro, let's go play." I spun around to look, but no one was there. I dropped the doll, and it sank like a stone into the murky depths of the river. It disappeared from sight almost instantly. I left the riverbank immediately, feeling so terribly sad and alone. I just had to get away from there. I decided to search for Mickey's grave. I had never visited it. I felt so bad about how I treated the poor girl. I went home and asked my mother if she might know where Mickey's grave was. She did know, and I set off. Her grave was a small pile of natural stones. I guess her father couldn't afford a headstone, or had to choose between the alcohol and an appropriate memorial. It hadn't been well maintained either. I guess that's because her father was now in jail. I put my hands together to pray and shut my eyes. The sounds of summer faded until the whole area around me was eerily quiet. The cicadas stopped calling. It was silent. I opened my eyes, and a small black figure emerged from behind Mickey's stone grave, and it stood before me. Then I heard, "Do your best, big brother." I guess it could have all been a hallucination. I wasn't well, and I had a lot on my mind, but it felt so real. I thought about my 2 daughters on the way home. I have to do my best for them. Then I thought about buying a big doll for Mickey and leaving it at her grave.
This story happened a couple of years ago. I had lost my great-grandmother to cancer a couple of years before this incident. I was in my room and got up to go to my closet. I remember I had something I wanted to find, but I didn't know where it was. I thought to check my closet because I have a couple of things stored in there. I was on the floor, riffling through my box of things, and I was dead set on finding this item because I really needed it. Now, I don't remember what I was looking for though. All of a sudden, I smell a scent. It was a light, good scent. It smelled familiar, and as soon as I realized what it was, I froze in my tracks. It was her. I paused with my arms stuck in the position they were in when I was looking in the box. Terrified, I slowly turned around to see nothing. I even stood and walked a couple of feet out of my closet just to make sure that I was alone. Honestly, all I could do was just stand there, frozen. I didn't know what to do or how to react, and the smell dissipated not too long after that I walked out of my closet. I have no clue what made her visit me of all people. I wasn't even thinking of her in that moment because all I was concerned about was the missing item. That was the only thing on my mind. Maybe it's because I'm sensitive to spirits, but how could she know that? Also, I wonder what took her so long. She visited me twice in my dreams after she died, but this was a while before the closet situation, and I haven't smelled her since. I remember hearing her say years ago that whenever she died, she wouldn't bother us if she paid us a visit. I see. She still kept her promise.
Back in the 70s, when my parents were a young couple, they lived in a cool duplex in McAllen, Texas. They had an elderly couple as neighbors who had been married for something of about 60 years. The wife had dementia, and her husband dedicated his entire life to make sure she lived comfortably. The husband became super close to my parents, as they would often have a beer or dinner with him, and sometimes his wife when she was in her right mind. One day, the elderly husband came and just gave my dad really expensive cuts of steak out of nowhere. My parents, just starting their careers and being a broke young couple, didn't really see this as strange. Later that night, the police came knocking on my parents' door and informed my parents there was a murder-suicide right next door to them. The elderly husband was actually close to losing a battle with his own serious health issues and didn't want his wife to live miserably in a home. She apparently agreed with a note found later on the scene. He placed her in her favorite nightgown, painted her nails, did her hair, and then smothered her with a pillow. He then put on his best suit and hung himself in the closet. The husband left a note in their fridge to let my parents have anything from their kitchen they need. They didn't eat the steaks or take any more food for obvious reasons. My parents kept seeing the elderly man in the window next door and would hear movement next door even though no one was living there. The weird occurrences stopped when my parents were a bit broke and finally ate the steaks the elderly man gave them. Apparently some of the best steaks they've ever had. Not really scary or menacing, but I had to get this off my chest.
Some context before I get to my actual story. My aunt passed away in February of 2018, and I'm currently living with my uncle, her husband for college. Now, the story begins on fall night in 2018, several months after my aunt's passing. My parents drove from my hometown to my house to spend some time with my uncle and I. I got relegated to the couch while my parents took my bedroom. It was around 1 a.m. and I was sitting on the couch on YouTube when I noticed the bag of chips in the kitchen floor begin to rustle around. I ignored it and continued watching my video, but then over the top of my phone I noticed a gift bag on the counter being lifted up, like someone was looking through them. No one was there to be doing it, so I just continued to ignore it, while also being very freaked out. When my video paused due to me sending a text to my friend, I heard floorboards depressing like someone stepping on it. I immediately took out my earbuds and peered around to see if someone was waking up, but then I heard the footsteps coming from the kitchen right towards me on the couch, with nobody there to make the sound. I immediately got up and ran to wake up my parents. When I told my uncle about the incident that happened to me next morning, he explained to me that he saw my aunt walking down the hallway earlier that same day. Small things would normally happen around the house, like cold spots, seeing orbs, a figure, arguably and scariest, and even sometimes talking, like the scariest. I just have a feeling that it's my aunt because it's never had any ill intent, just trying to let us know it's there. The story happened to me in December, a few months after the first story. I was sitting at my desktop in my room with my headphones on, listening to some music while I did my schoolwork. The time was around 2:45 p.m., which is important because my uncle doesn't get off of work until 5:30 p.m. So I was alone in the house. At the time too, I was on FaceTime with my friend. When I heard pounding on my bedroom door, it was loud. I felt it sitting in my chair. I whipped around the chair to look at my door, and my friend asked what's wrong, and I told her I'd be right back. I grabbed my gun because I knew I was the only one in the home, after looking at my bedroom window to see if my only car was in the driveway, and I cleared the house. After looking through every room in the house, all the doors and windows were still locked, and I was still the only person in the house. So I go back to my room and continue to do my work. Not even 5 minutes go by, and more pounding on my bedroom door. This time I quickly get up and open the door. Nothing. No one in the house, just me again. At this point, I'm used to the activity. It's not too much of a burden anymore, and doesn't happen as often as frequently as it did. Now it's just seeing quick glances of a figure, lights turning on or off by themselves, and doors that are open, closing by themselves. And it's not even slamming shut. It's just gently pushing it and latching itself into place. You could argue it's air pressure or air conditioning, but I thought the same and tried it for myself to find the doors are too heavy for the air to affect them. If anything else happens that's interesting, I'll definitely post again, but I do have a few more stories not pertaining to these certain instances.
So this is one of many stories I have. I never considered myself psychic or sensitive until a few years ago, when I found out stories like mine weren't common with everyone. So, before I can tell the story, I have to give some background. Bear with me. My brother and I have different dads. Unfortunately, his dad passed away a year prior to when this story is set. My mum and his dad did not do well together. He wasn't a bad guy, just troubled, and really didn't know how to be a good partner. My mum said that after they separated and she met my dad and got pregnant with me, my brother's dad said, "You finally got the girl you always wanted." This was something she had told him when they were together, that she always wanted a daughter, but obviously they didn't stay together to have another kid. When I was little, he was always really sweet to me. Not in a creepy way, just always interested and asking how I am. My mum said she felt like he always felt drawn to me, maybe because he regretted the end of his relationship with her, and I, in some way, made him think of what could have been. Who knows? Okay, so moving on to the story. A few weeks after my brother's dad died, I had a dream that I was in a hallway with him. He told me he was okay, and that he wanted to show me something. He grabbed a door handle, opened the door, and the brightest light came through. But then I woke up. I wish I could remember what he showed me, or if he did show me anything at all. Okay, now fast forward in time. It was Christmas Eve, 2009, a year later. I was upstairs in my bedroom and I heard music playing. We had a room next to mine with all kinds of toys because I had a lot of nieces and nephews that came over. I assumed the music was coming from there, so I walked into the room to check. It was not coming from that room, and I realized it was coming from the bathroom. The bathroom? Odd, I thought. I went in there and realized the music was coming from a 3-tier box, each tier with a drawer where my mum kept jewelry and other keepsakes. As soon as I touched the box, the music abruptly stopped. I was 21 at this time, and in all the years of living with my parents, I had never heard music come from this box, and she has had it my entire life. I go downstairs and tell my mum the weirdest thing just happened, and I tell her the story. Her face goes completely white. She looks totally freaked out, and her eyes well up with tears. She then tells me that is a jewelry box that her ex-husband, my brother's dad who died, gave her on their wedding day. She said it hasn't played music in 35 years because it broke. We even went upstairs to try to recreate the music and get it to work with no luck. I just smiled and shrugged and said, well, I guess he is saying Merry Christmas. I don't know why he chooses me to go through for these messages. We were not close, but I do think part of it is that he knows I won't brush things off as my brain or something weird. I feel they are from him, and he knows I'll share the message. My brother pretty much hasn't been very receptive to the messages, and I don't want to make him uncomfortable or upset him. Sorry this is so long, but wanted to share as it's special to me. Happy holidays, everyone. Well, another year's almost over. I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you all. So this video was a little bit different. I thought since we had such a hard year, it'd be good to end it with a bit more of a positive note. A reminder that you should appreciate what you have and those you're with. I never expected to get more than 100 subs with this channel, and I did it all with all of your support. From the subscribers and the viewers, the regular commenters, and of course, all of my fellow horror narrators. I really truly do thank you all so much. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas or whatever you choose to celebrate. And let's hope next year is a better year than this one. Thank you all.